Hey there, it's Olivia-Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm so excited because I'm here to talk to you about Midnight Sun. But before we get started, there's two things you need to know about the video. The first one is that the representation of the Quileute tribe in this saga is incredibly awful, and they have a move to higher ground thing going on right now where they're trying to move to a safer zone with the whole tribe, and I'll leave a link to where you can donate to that down below. Every time I mention this series in a video of mine, I've pledged to donate to the tribe, and if you'd like to join me in doing so and you enjoy this video, maybe you should consider doing the same as well. And the second thing you need to know is that this video is going to include
spoilers.
I have already read the first 100 pages and I have so much to talk about. I actually got really excited starting this novel, and I thought that my excitement had worn off simply because I was like, I'm over the Twilight Saga. Yo, I am not over it. I'm not over it at all. So let's get to the beginning. So I forgot that we were going to get Edward's perspective, as in I knew it was going to be about Edward, but I forgot that with Edward's perspective comes his ability to read through minds, and I'm finding that so interesting to hear everybody's thoughts, to get to know the insides of people as well as the outsides, because as this book is showing us, the inside of someone is not always aligning with what they say and what they do. You can definitely see that so far in Jessica's character. Boy, is she mean. When I read this series, I thought that she wasn't the best friend to Bella, but I didn't think she was as vicious as her mind is, which on the other hand makes Lauren refreshing. She's vicious to Bella, but her actions match up to the way she treats Bella, you know, outwardly, and I much prefer mean people where it matches up outwardly rather than them being nice to you on the face of it and then being really mean to you behind your back or in their thoughts. It's also really nice, continuing on with the mind reading thing, to see Edward interact with his family and the kind of discrepancy between him being able to do mind conversations but also speaking out loud. I feel like it's written very well, that complicated aspect of being able to read people's minds, and they know that you can do it and how you communicate therefore. And it's also really interesting to see Alice and Edward's thoughts kind of play off of each other, their powers play off of each other. So there's a scene where Alice and Edward are thinking about Jasper attacking Bella, and Edward's reading Alice's mind and Alice's vision changes because Edward is reading her mind. Very genius, love seeing that. Kind of jumping around here, but branching off of being able to read people's minds, I absolutely love the tidbit where it mentions that Charlie is someone whose mind he can't read very clearly. He can't see the distinct words and only can feel the tone and the shift of his moods, which aligns with why Bella is the way that Bella is. You can see it being a bit inherited through the family, and I like those details. Those are the details that I'm reading Midnight Sun for, to see a bit more of the behind the scenes or the inner workings of why things happen, and that's really fun and very fascinating to me. Also, I really love any moment with the Cullen family. Again, that's another reason why I'm really here. I'm here to see the interactions with the Cullens. I absolutely love them and the found family aspect that they have. I am a bit upset that Emmett and Rosalie seem overly simplified. He describes what their minds are like and it's all very straightforward. It's all very what we see on the outside. I do like how Emmett and him are like more friendly. You get to see more of the friendship aspect there, but it still falls a bit like I wanted more in-depthness to their character. We see Rosalie in one way through Bella's perspective and lens, and I really feel like there's more to her character, but it's not really exploring that. There was one line I had to laugh out loud at where Edward and Alice are explaining why they're such good friends, which makes sense. They both got powers, they're both very advanced vampires when it comes to their powers, so of course they naturally align with each other. But he mentions that him and Alice are very good at doing these mind-reading conversations, which made me laugh so much because in the Twilight Saga, from Bella's perspective, we're always getting Bella catching out Alice and Edward's inward thought conversations. Secondly, I love Jasper, okay? I really love Jasper. He's my favourite Cullen vampire, and that is that. But I really like what we're seeing here of him. So one of my criticisms of the main saga is, why is Edward acting like Jasper is such a danger to Bella when Jasper manages to be at this secondary school all the time, no problem. However, in this book it's shown so far that it's not no problem. Jasper is really internally struggling, and I like that. I also like that Jasper immediately was like, Bella is a problem, let's eliminate Bella. I feel like that's exactly what his mind would go to regarding his history with war and battle strategy. But then Alice says don't do it, and the fact that he would do anything for Alice, I ship them so much. I love that ship so much. Also get to see how much Edward looks up to Carlisle as role model, and we can definitely see this in the main series, but I feel like I didn't fully grasp how much until I read the beginning of this novel. He really thinks Carlisle is the ideal, and Carlisle is actually so cute. I mean, if he wasn't such a dad, but he is such a dad, so we'll just leave that there. But I really like seeing how much Edward admires Carlisle. It really makes that father-son situation shine through, and I really like the parents in the Twilight Saga. I feel like the parents, Charlie, Carlisle, Esme, Billy to Jacob, they really make this series. Also, finally, we get to see what it's like to really be a vampire. I feel like in Breaking Dawn we were a bit cheated because Bella is so naturally a vampire that's a vegetarian that she doesn't have any of the urges of a newborn. And I know we get the short life of Britannia, but I feel like that story was so boring and I just wasn't very interested. But here we get to see more of Edward's vampiric nature. Rather than the perspective of Edward as an angel, Edward is perfect, that we get in Twilight, we get to see that he does have vampiric urges. He mentions how, oh, I shouldn't say urges, he mentions how at one point someone just walks past him and already the venom is filling his mouth and he's like smelling the scents and everything. That's what I wanted from a vampire perspective. We get to see how vampiric he truly is. And that scene in the classroom where he meets Bella for the first time and he gets a whiff of her scent and he just imagines all the ways in which he can kill her, he can lure her out to kill her later. And even after that scene when they are at the school office, he's even still thinking about it then. And I think it's going to show how much danger Bella really is in all the time that she's with Edward. I know that Edward just keeps saying it and telling us this in Twilight, but now we really get to see it, and that's what's driving it home all the more and making it seem more scary. That said, about Edward being a vampiric monster, I really can't stand the fact that he keeps calling himself the monster, or it's almost like an alter ego. He's like, I don't want to eat her, but the monster in me wants to eat her. And I know that I did a book battle where I compared Twilight to 50 Shades of Grey, but I can't help making the comparison again. In 50 Shades of Grey, she's always like, oh, my medulla oblongata wants me to do this, or the goddess within me wants to do this. And it's just like, no, just talk about yourself. You don't need to make them separate entities. And I feel like the separate entity thing is not working here either. I'd rather he just said me, or like the darker side within me, rather than be like the monster as if it's another person or a muse or something. Bella is so observant in this book, and I feel like it's making me like Bella all the more. I've heard from other reviewers that they do like Bella more in this book, and I can definitely see why. She comes across as brave, she comes across as clever and observant, and while I did think all of those things from her when I read the Twilight Saga, I even wrote an essay about how she like has so much autonomy and gets what she wants, it's all the more understated and underlined in this book, and I really love seeing that. It shows the different ways in which dialogue and body language is understood and taken in by the other person. So when you're thinking one thing in a conversation and you think that that person's thinking that, they may not be. They may be thinking something entirely different, and I like that this book is showing us that, and it's specifically making me understand all the moments where Edward has his emotional whiplash in the first Twilight book. In the first Twilight book he gets a lot of criticism for mood swinging like crazy, because he does, but now we get to see the thought process behind all of those mood swings. That said, it does get a bit monologue-y at times. Edward is a thinker, okay? He thinks a lot. Sometimes we get pages where there's no dialogue and it's just him trapped in his thoughts, and that's why this book is 756 pages long. It's a bit long-winded. Do I think it could be trimmed down? Yes. Am I still going to read all of it? Yes. I do sometimes find the dialogue a little bit boring just because it's exactly the same dialogue as in Twilight. So anytime when Bella and Edward are talking, I don't particularly care. But if we go to a scene where Bella's not there and Edward's talking with his family, I am so down. So I think the added scenes in this are what's going to make this book shine for me, rather than the scenes with Bella and Edward. Even though I understand Edward's side of the situation in those conversations more, it's still not making those conversations very interesting. And then last but not least for this section, I want to talk about the fact that Edward knows he's going to fall in love with Bella before Bella knows that she's going to fall in love with Edward. And I know it could go either way as for where I've ended right now with my reading, but I find it absolutely a hilarious and very awkward situation to have that foresight, like that's the person you're going to fall in love with. Interesting concept. So I was supposed to be updating you every 100 pages, but now I'm a third of the way through the book, so we're just gonna roll with it and I'll update you with all of my thoughts up until now. So I know that Alice saw Bella coming, but the cutest thing is how excited Alice is for the friendship that she's gonna have with Bella. I know that Bella truly values the friendship with Alice, but seeing that friendship before it's even happened feel so strong is absolutely the sweetest thing ever. Also, in the beginning of the book, this is kind of stopped now that he's met Bella and talked to her and such. He kept calling Bella the girl, and it was really, really annoying me, but however, that has stopped, that has ended, and that's really good that it's finished. I like that Edward does acknowledge that watching her in her sleep is creepy, and acknowledges that he's overprotective and over the top with needing to watch her everywhere he goes. I do get it to some degree. Unlike the other vampires, Bella is very breakable, she's very fragile in comparison, and the book really underlines that. But I still think his stalking isn't quite justified. He acknowledges it's weird, it's creepy, and yet he still just does it anyway, and it doesn't quite sit right with me. It still makes me just as uncomfortable as when I read it in Twilight itself. There's a little bit of a backstory on how each of these couples met when Edward's trying to decide how he needs to approach Bella romantically and all of that jazz. And the cutest thing was seeing Carlisle and Esme's relationship, simply because we haven't seen that much of Carlisle and Esme in a romantic light, seeing as they're the parents. So it was really cute getting to see those like little tidbits of their romance. I do feel like I expected to see more of Esme in this book. I get that she's a quiet character, but I did want, I don't know, a bit more of her. Maybe we'll see more of her a bit later on. So Edward is clearly an overthinker, so we're seeing a lot about he's like, oh no, I want to eat Bella, oh no, I want to date Bella, I don't know how to date someone, what is she thinking of me? We get a lot of those thoughts, a lot, and I get that he's an overthinker, but it is a bit exhausting, it is a bit boring and a bit repetitive. So that's where I'm starting to lose a little bit of interest in Midnight Sun. It's just the fact that Edward overthinks, and it's just not a great place to be because his thoughts are a cycle that go round and round, which is very realistic. People do think like that. I know I think like that sometimes when I am overthinking, but it's just a bit exhausting to read and not my favourite thing to read. I've also a bit done with the dialogue between him and Bella. My favourite scenes of this are the extra scenes, when Bella is asleep or when he's doing something with the Cullen family. Those are my favourite parts, the parts where I'm most in tune to the story. So anytime that we're seeing the romance but just from Edward's perspective, or we're getting his overthinking, I'm a little bit less tuned in, a little bit less interested, and I think that's where this book is going to lose a lot of stars for me. Mike is made even more annoying in this book just because we get to see his thoughts. I always found Mike a very annoying character in the main series simply because he doesn't take no as an answer, but we're getting to see that none of the human group that Bella hangs out with, except for Angela, is really nice or just generally a kind person. And while I understand that, it sours some of the human scenes for me. There are some moments in the Twilight Saga where they're just at the beach or they're chilling, and yes, they got to navigate Laura, who's really mean, and I know that Jessica's petty, but they've really made her so mean that it just sours some of those nice scenes from the Twilight Saga, and I'm a bit sad that all of those human moments are kind of tinted in my mind forevermore. I kind of wish it wasn't like that. There's also a line where Stephenie Meyer has started to throw in the Hades and Persephone reference. I knew it was coming with the cover, I knew it was coming from reviews, but she did not, you know, do this discreetly. She just threw the image in there and she's gonna hit you over the head with that image. Oh, we love Stephenie Meyer's very discreet writing. Edward's like, Bella's number was up when I first met her, and it immediately made me think about Final Destination, and what if this whole series is actually just a series that is based on Final Destination, and Bella was supposed to die and then she cheated death because Edward didn't eat her, and then ever since then everything that happens to her consecutively is people trying to kill her because she was supposed to be dead, but she manages to actually beat the whole system and win by cheating death, by becoming a vampire, which is technically dead but undead. And now I can't stop thinking about that theory. Also, I read the part where they're in the car and Bella asks, how old are you? And Edward says 17, and Bella says, how long have you been 17? And Edward says a while. This is exactly the same dialogue that is in the original Twilight Saga, and yet every time I hear those lines, I am just... I love those lines so much. 4 lines, they have my heart. Also, every time Jasper or Carlisle is briefly mentioned in this book, I literally melt into tears of fangirl. So I've just accepted that I have a crush on both of them, and I've just accepted it. I wanted to talk a little bit about Rosalie. I know I think I mentioned that Rosalie and Emmett are flat characters, but I was talking with someone who's also read this book, and she mentioned that Rosalie is incredibly selfish and vain, and that's kind of her biggest personality trait, but I feel like there's so much more to her simply because she's complex in her selfishness. She's complex, like her selfishness has so many aspects to it that add up to making her her, and she's so passionate about being selfish. I feel like there could have been a lot more to her, and I really am interested in this dynamic where she really wants to be human and Emmett knows that she wants to be human and just has to accept that in the relationship, accept that she would give up him to be human. I feel like there's a dynamic there that could be explored more, but we don't have time for that. The story's not about them. But yeah, I'm a bit disappointed in Rosalie's character as well. Edward talks to Carlisle and Carlisle is marvelling at how Bella is actually good for Edward, and I never really considered that because in the Twilight Saga we're getting Bella's perspective. You really care about how Edward influences her, how Edward manipulates her, and etc, etc. But here we get to see that Bella does have a good positive effect on Edward too, and that's just nice. It's nice to see that in a relationship. And literally Carlisle's the cutest because he even apologizes for his thoughts. Oh, I really liked the extra scene that was added where they went and looked for the rapist and murderer who tried to assault Bella and then decided to try and do something about that to get some level of justice. It's not a scene that's in the main saga, but it's just a nice extra scene. I really like that. Charlie dreams of fishing, which I think is just so in character. Edward is also always talking about his teeth and how people should be petrified of his teeth. And does he know that he doesn't have fangs? There's nothing about his teeth that look more surreal to anybody else than anybody else's teeth. Maybe they're just extremely straight and not needing braces or something. I don't even know. But the idea that he thinks he should be petrifying when he smiles is laughable to me just because his teeth are the same as everybody else's. And then last but not least, I wanted to mention that I feel like Stephanie Meyer read 50 Shades. I mean, I feel like she would never do that. But did she take some notes from 50 Shades? Because all of a sudden, Bella is a character who bites her lip and Edward is a guy who notices how much she bites her lip. And I just find that very funny. If I look tired, it's probably because I am. It's quite late. But I've read 2/3 of the way through Midnight Sun and it is time to give you an update. And I need to say, unfortunately, I'm just not enjoying this as much as I expected to. I'm 2/3 of the way through and I feel like this book is really slowing down for me. And I did mention how I'm less interested in the parts where Edward and Bella are together, but now that their love has been, you know, discussed and they've agreed that they're going to be a thing, it's literally mostly those scenes, so it's definitely slowed down for me. I also feel like this book is just too long. I kind of wish she cut some of the things that we already knew and just filled it with more extra scenes and then like skimmed over the parts that we knew, simply because it does not need to be 750 pages long, and some of the extra things, I must admit, they're not entirely necessary, so it's just really, really long. I know she's writing it like for the fans and it's like a fun book, but it's still just not as good as I wanted it to be. And the other thing is the angst. The angst. Edward has always been an angsty character and I am someone who loves angst. I read a lot of romance fiction where it's just like two characters have to work through all their angstiness, and yet Edward is just peak angst too much for me. He overthinks everything, it's really slowing down the story, and he does go back and forwards on his emotions, and I guess we see the justifications for that, but it's still quite a lot and impeding my enjoyment of this book quite a bit. But now let's go into some detailed parts. I really liked seeing Edward and Emmett setting up Angela and Ben. We know that that couple happens in the main saga, but we don't know that they're kind of behind it, and it was cute. I feel like all of the moments where we see Edward and Emmett together in that classroom where they're kind of having banter, or you know, Edward's threatening Emmett because he made a bet, all of those scenes make me smile so much and I really enjoy them. I also quite liked learning a little bit more about Bella because of the fact that when Bella gets asked all of these unending questions by Edward, she kind of skims over it in Twilight because she doesn't think she's so important. But Edward finds Bella fascinating, so we're getting some more of her character, some more facets to who she is as a person by all of these answers and these discussions that they have that we don't get to see. It's pretty much like reading deleted scenes from Twilight, and I really liked that. I also quite like the bit where Jacob shows up at the house and Edward gets a glimpse into Jacob's mind and finds out that he likes Jacob's mind. I feel like the tone of a mind really impacts Edward's likability of that person, and because we know that Edward and Jacob end up as like son-in-law father situation, which is really weird, but they also kind of end up being friends a little bit before that, or at least they're friendly, and I think that beginning first impression of Jacob's mind shows that they could have had the potential to be friends all along if it wasn't for the fact that they were like fated enemies due to what they are, vampires and werewolves. They could have been really good friends, and I kind of liked that we got to see that. I found all of the scenes with Alice and Edward in this section particularly interesting. I find it interesting how she also is so protective of Bella. We do get to see that she cares about Bella's protection, but we don't get to see it from the extent that she was going to try and keep Edward from Bella to protect Bella. it's just nice to see that friendship that was there before the friendship even sprung. It's also just interesting again to see Alice lets Edward see what Bella would be like if he left Bella at this point, because we know that happens in New Moon, even though Edward doesn't know that yet, and maybe that glimpse wasn't just pertaining to if he left now, but when he leaves in New Moon. And I found that to be a really nice tidbit, a bit of foreshadowing, even though it's not quite foreshadowing, seeing as we've already, you know, got the whole Twilight saga. And again, another interesting moment where Alice and Edward kind of have their brain power, future power thing going on, is how they become instant friends the first time that they meet. I really like that scene simply because that's how their powers work. Alice sees the future, Edward can see the future, and then suddenly they know everything about each other, so they can skip the small talk, they can skip those awkward phases before you really know someone so well, and they can become instantaneous friends. I really like that. I really like all these scenes we're getting to see of their history, where Alice and Jasper blend into the family for the first time. I thought it was really cute to see just Carlisle and Edward, because I feel like it's easy to forget that there was a period of time where it was just Carlisle and Edward without Esme in the picture, and just seeing how, you know, their dynamic was, how Carlisle made Christmas for him and everything was really sweet. And I think seeing the part where Edward goes off to be a vampire and then seeing him come back. Speaking of the past some more, I find it makes a lot of sense that the thing that makes Edward and Rosalie into siblings, or into a sibling relationship rather than just annoyance at each other, is that Emmett shows up, even though Emmett's not even conscious at the point that they decide to actually, you know, have a sibling-like relationship. He is the driving factor, and I feel like that was kind of necessary. I don't really see Rosalie and Edward being good siblings to each other unless Emmett was in the picture or somebody else was in the picture. Speaking of Rosalie, I did complain about her being such a flat character, but they just had that discussion where Ed was like, please let me bring Bella over, and Rosalie kind of relents and they have a bit more of an in-depth discussion, and I feel like it gives her character a bit more personality, but I wouldn't say more personality than, say, Eclipse or Breaking Dawn when we get her backstory. We've got to give it to Maya for her writing. It really has stayed the same. I quote, "Her heart throbbed wetly just a foot from my ear." That's like 3 body parts too close together, and also how can a heart throb wetly? I don't really have anything in particular to say about the meadow scene. I feel like it was just the same scene but from Edward's point of view, so there was not really anything new added to the mix. I did find it interesting when Edward briefly talked about how the thirst that all of those vampires feel can be described in different ways by each of them. That was an interesting insight. So glad that he mentioned that the monster thing that he was going on is a bad coping mechanism. I think that means we won't see any more of the monster in the rest of the book, and it was really getting me because I was really annoyed by that writing. Also, there was a very cute moment, I just live for Jasper scenes, okay, where he mentions that every time Jasper thinks of how he met Alice, the whole house and everyone in it is flooded with dreamy contentment because that's how he feels when he thinks about it. Ah, be still my heart. You know, Twilight is a story of first love, seeing as Bella is, you know, this is the first time Bella has a really deep, meaningful relationship with someone that she's truly in love with, as she says, but I'm not going to discredit her love. Edward spends too much time discrediting the fact that she says she loves him, so not going to discredit that. But this is the first time that Bella's had a romantic relationship, and in Twilight, it doesn't feel like a first love story too much because of the fact that she's also dating a vampire, so a lot of her, like, oh, this is my first love thoughts immediately morph into, and what does this mean that he's a vampire, or how can we get past this vampiric thing, and how do I become a vampire? So it's quite focused on the whole vampire aspect of things, but because we're in Edward's mind, rather than it being, yeah, he spends a lot of time thinking like, oh, I want to eat her, oh, but I can't. He does that quite a bit, but he also spends a lot of time being like, how do I date someone? How do I show her I love her? Can I touch her? Can I not? And it's a lot more of the dithering about on that first love aspect than in Twilight. So I feel like this feels even more young adult than Twilight did, which is strange because Twilight's the one from the 17-year-old's perspective and this is the one from like 100 and something year old perspective. But, you know, Bella's kind of like an adult, as she says, so I don't know. She's mentally an adult, so I don't know, but I feel like this one feels a lot more young adult than the Twilight Saga did. And then we got to the part where Bella gets to visit the Cullens for the first time, and I laughed so hard at the scene because Bella literally comes in and meets Esme, and she says like 3-5 words to Esme. She says, "It's nice to meet you," and Esme's thinking in her mind, I love her, Bella is the best, can we adopt her? She's so in love with Bella, and Bella's only said 5 words. I just find it so funny, but also Esme is actually the sweetest. And then last but not least, I just wanted to talk about the tear scene. So we know in the main saga of Twilight, Edward plays the lullaby for Bella Bella and Bella cries, and then Edward reaches out and touches the tear and then like eats the tear, which is the strangest thing. And I was ready for that scene because I wanted a bit more of an explanation, but we get literally no explanation. In fact, I was just laughing out loud because the explanation we get is hilarious but doesn't fit anything, doesn't explain anything. So I'm just going to read from my phone here because I wrote down the quote. "I'm absorbing this minute part of her. Perhaps it would never leave my body. I'll always have this piece of her inside me." Excuse me, what? What? What was that? So my nails now match the book. It's the perfect time to talk about it. I've only got 100 pages of this tome left and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be my last read of this year. I'm looking forward to finishing this book, but I'm here to tell you about all of my thoughts up until those last 100 pages. First of all, I just wanted to talk about the fact that I feel like I already knew that Jasper gravitated towards happy feelings, but I was talking about this with someone else who is a fan of the series, and they said that it's not explicitly stated in the Twilight Saga, so I think I'm just entirely too aware of Jasper as a character, but in this one it makes it explicitly clear that Jasper does gravitate towards happy feelings. He wants to enter the room where Edward and Bella are just because they're exuding so much happiness and romance and peaceful feelings. And as for the famous baseball scene of the game, there are just some things that I completely forgot when reading from Bella's perspective. Because we've always been reading from Bella's perspective, I always see them playing the baseball game as, hey, these are just some vampires playing baseball and they look really cool while doing so. Okay, that's a thought from the films. But I completely forgot the fact that Edward and Alice are playing, and that's going to have a huge impact on how this game works. When Esme says that she monitors them for cheating, I thought she meant just the rules of the game. I forgot that Edward can read people's minds of where they intend to bat or the strategy that they intend to play, and Alice can see the future of where the ball is going to land. That definitely has a big shift on how the game works, but I quite liked seeing how the game played out and how they had to quell their powers in certain ways, and the fact that they had those abilities and gifts does not mean that they automatically won the baseball game either. Very interesting, loved seeing it and reading it from this perspective. And also during the game and directly what happens after the game, it's quite nice to see that Carlisle, Esme and Emmett immediately kind of say Bella is part of the family. They all eventually get to that point towards the end where they're trying to protect her, but in the beginning it seems like for Edward's sake they're tolerating Bella, but by the time the game ends they like Bella, they protect her, they see her as part of the extended Cullen family, and that's just so sweet to see that happen from the first book almost instantly. I also just wanted to bring up the fact that we can clearly see how protective Jasper is of Alice. The whole time with the three confronting them in the meadow of the baseball game, Jasper is immediately trying to protect Alice above all else, and that makes sense because Alice is, you know, his mate, his girl. But as well as that, there's different points in the book where you just see Jasper be protective of Alice, especially in the beginning where there's this whole conversation where Jasper's like, we need to get rid of Bella, and Alice is like, no, she's my friend, and then Jasper's staggered and decides that he's not going to attack Bella anymore. All of this goes to show that Jasper is just as protective of Alice, and Alice has abilities which give her an advantage over anyone else. Alice is someone who doesn't need that much protecting. Kind of like Edward, she is independent, she can go about on her own, she does not need Jasper bodyguarding her. But I think looking at Jasper and Alice is a good way of understanding the behaviour between Edward and Bella, because we see that this protectiveness from the male when it comes to their mate is just vampirism, and it's just how they show and express their vampiric nature and love and affection. Even though Alice doesn't need that protecting, Jasper is still giving it all the time. So when it comes to Edward and Bella who definitely needs that protecting, at least in the eyes of a vampire because she's human and there's so much more that can kill her than can kill Alice, you know, Edward's behaviour is not anything new. Edward's overprotectiveness is not anything new. It just makes a lot more sense in that context, and I kind of like how we see Alice and Jasper doing the same. Emmett and Rosalie do it too to some degree, but a little bit less so than Alice and Jasper does, because Jasper has that bodyguard nature to him and that wall nature to him. So just seeing those two run in parallel goes to show that Edward's nature is not anything new, although the sleeping and stalking is a bit much. So originally, when I started to read the part where the three vampires come for the confrontation, I was like, oh, I love how they're all attracted to Emmett as this big threat that they need to watch out for, and then Jasper is kind of subtle and quiet, and even though he is technically the biggest threat because he has the most war experience, he knows how to fight, he knows how to win, he's the one who trains them all in fighting later on. I was like, Jasper's the biggest threat, but he's just under the radar, no one notices him. And I was like, I love that for Jasper, that just seems to fit his character so much. Can you tell I'm a Jasper fan? That's just what this whole section is going to be. But then later on we realized that Jasper, his powers, man, his gift was so underrated in the main series. We get to see that all through this section. He is using it to the max. He is able to make Bella look almost invisible by the way that he's exuding his like calm, normal, I'm uninteresting presence, and he's doing it to protect Esme and Alice as well. I just love that he's working so hard so immediately, and it just made me fall in love with Jasper a little bit more. His gift is so strong. Like, I feel like in the main series we definitely see that Alice and Edward's gifts are the strongest and the ones that people should want to have. Even Arrow and the Volturi want their gift, but if they understood the depth and the extent of Jasper's gift, I feel like they should have wanted it too. Like when Arrow reaches for Edward's hand and then is like, oh wow, I want Edward and Alice. I feel like he should have been able to see Edward's relationship and thoughts with Jasper and known that Jasper is an underrated quiet gift, which is extra powerful. I feel like his gift also very much reflects his character. He is so underrated, but he is so amazing. That's all I have to say. I feel like just contrasting Edward and Jasper in that moment, Edward is basically showing off his gift. He's moving before the tracker moves himself. He finishes his protective stance before the tracker does, and of course there's no question in his mind as to why he wouldn't use that to protect Bella. I understand, but he's kind of signposting his abilities, whereas Jasper is working so hard to keep his quiet and on the down low. There's even things about Jasper's gift that Edward doesn't realize until this point after all the years he's spent with Jasper. I feel like Jasper just has a lot of secrets that he keeps within himself, which he does for the benefit of being able to pull them out when he needs them, but it just goes to show like, wow, he's got a lot more to him than what meets the eye. So I originally got excited because Edward and Bella were going to split up, and those are my favorite moments when he's not with Bella, and they were going to run around and trace this track, and I was like, oh, we're going to get extra action scenes that make sense for why this book is so long. But in the end it was just them running all over the place, and it was very unconfrontational. There was no fighting, there was no extra action. It was just them running through like the plains for quite a bit of time, and I got really bored with that scene, and I was like, wow, I kind of didn't need this from Edward's perspective. I would have much rather that we were with Bella and with Alice and seeing what they were getting up to, because that was actually the more interesting point in the story. There were some extra scenes that were interesting to see. For example, the scene where Edward has just got Bella into the car and he's like, we need to drive away and leave Charlie and leave everything and just run away. There's a lot more subtext in that conversation of what Edward is saying to Alice versus what Bella thinks Edward is saying to her, and that's very clever. It was very cleverly written, because from Bella's perspective the whole conversation makes sense, but also from Edward's perspective the whole conversation makes sense plus more, because there's a whole conversation going on within his mind with Alice, and his out loud answers also correlates with what is being said in the original Twilight book. I also found it absolutely hilarious when Twilight, Midnight Sun, suddenly turned into Fast and Furious. Like, they're speeding away from the airport and Edward gets this car which has Nos gas in it, and he's having his Fast and Furious moment, like weaving between the cars, and I just found it so hilarious. And then when the side mirrors get ruined and he has to use Jasper and Emmett as like the side mirrors, I don't know why I found that absolutely hilarious, but I was laughing so much and I was so entertained. It was comedy gold. But I also, again, was fangirling about Jasper. I literally don't care about Edward and Bella in this book. I literally only care about the extra parts we get to see about Alice and the extra parts we get to see about Jasper, because it was so interesting seeing how powerful Jasper is. He could even give a battle feeling, emotion, so they all work seamlessly together. I actually put in my review notes, wow, the Cullens work well as a team, and then it was just brought to my attention that Jasper is the one who's making them function more as a team. He's even calming down Edward throughout. He's literally expelling his powers to the max and doing so much work. The whole thing couldn't have worked without Jasper. Just saying. I mean, it couldn't have worked without, you know, any of them, but still, like, Jasper is a key player, and I thought he wasn't a key player in these moments. So that makes me happy. I was also like trying to imagine what Jasper is thinking, because Edward is freaking out, and Jasper even has to touch Edward to calm him down. And I'm just thinking, like, Jasper's like, oh my gosh, I just have to keep using my powers for this guy. But, you know, they're family, so you definitely would do it. Anyway, I need to stop fangirling about Jasper and try and pay attention to the main storyline. I finished reading Midnight Sun, and I actually have quite a few thoughts about those last 100 pages. I really enjoyed some of it, and some of it I didn't think was necessary, so let's talk about it. First of all, of course, during the whole fight scene, there is no fight scene for us. We skip right through it and we go straight towards Bella, because realistically that's what Edward would do. Again, I was just a bit more disappointed because I was hoping that we would get to see action. I didn't expect this section of the story to be more action filled from Bella's point of view rather than from Edward's point of view. So that was all in all quite a bit disappointing. And I also understand Edward's turmoil when it comes to Bella's bite on her wrist, because when we're in Bella's point of view, by now we know she wants to be a vampire, she would do anything for that, but Edward doesn't actually know if she wants that or not, and he definitely doesn't want that for her. So we understand the emotional turmoil he has in deciding whether he's going to try and remove the venom from her system. I also found the scene incredibly cute, which it shouldn't have been, when Bella was unconscious in the car and they're all driving towards the hospital, and Emma and Jasper are holding their breath so that they don't acknowledge the blood that's all over the place. And it's just so heartwarming to see how much they accept Bella. I've been on and on about this already, but it is just really cute. It also made me wonder, like, what was that exaggeration in New Moon? Because Alice is breathing pretty freely here and just being okay with Bella's blood in the car, and Emma and Jasper are holding their breath and hanging it out like they're hanging in there fairly well. And I get that in New Moon it's less of a life or death situation. Why should they hang around a room that's full of blood if they don't necessarily need to hang around in a room full of blood? And Jasper was caught unaware and like unexpectedly when the paper cut happens, but it's such a small piece of blood compared to all the blood that's all around this car. Again, he's had a head start in this one, and there was a theory that we meaning me and the people reacting to read it backwards, that maybe Jasper just was wanting them to catch him in New Moon, like he was going with an automatic reaction, but he knew that he wouldn't do any serious damage, and that's why they were able to catch him and take him away so easily. I'll leave a link to my New Moon read it backwards so you can hear about that if you want. But yeah, I just putting that scene in the car in context of how they react when she gets a small paper cut. Well, it's a small paper cut, and then there's the whole smashing of items and cuts and stuff, but I was just like Also, it was really cool when we were in the car and we got to see Alice's gift happening in real time, where she was adjusting, she was seeing what the future was like, and then she was adjusting the decisions that she would make to impact the future. We've definitely seen her talents at work multiple times across this book, but I think that scene in particular in the car with her planning how to make the cover story for Bella was the one where we can see it to its full extent and potential, and I really enjoyed that. But at the beginning of this video I mentioned that Emma is quite a flat character. I said that Rosalie and Emma are still flat, and I'll remain with Esme being quite flat and just totally out of the picture every which way you look at it, and Rosalie being fairly flat, like nothing is added to her character to make her more 3D. But I take back what I said about Emmett. He's adoring and he's cute and he's sweet and he's very caring and loving, while also being this really strong and threatening, imposing guy. And you do get to see through his friendship with Edward some really nice moments, and also just his stray and errant thoughts that we hear about. They're actually really sweet. So I will take back what I said at the beginning and say that Emmett is one of the fleshed out characters in this book. I also like that the book gave a reason why Charlie didn't fly over to be with Bella during recovery, because while I didn't question this when reading the main series, I guess with Charlie's character as we know him, it makes sense that he would want to be exactly where Bella is while recovering. The only thing that I could think would keep him at bay was the idea that Bella did not want to see him, but you know, they gave a good reason, and I think it smooths that aspect of the book over, even though I never thought it was a problem in the first place. Also, when Charlie was talking to Carla on the phone and he was like, oh well, I can't come, but I'm sending Renee over there, it'll probably make Bella happier anyway, I was just ready to cry. Bella needs to do some work after this and tell Charlie how much she loves him and show Charlie how much value he has as a parent, because he believes that he's inferior to Renee, and I'm not saying he's not inferior to Renee, well, I prefer him as a parent than Renee. Charlie's great, okay? Charlie needs to know that he is loved and appreciated. Also briefly forgot that Edward does meet Renee all through the book, not all through the book, at some point in the book he's talking about Charlie's mind and he's like, oh, it'd be so interesting to see what the mum is like, and I was like, oh no, we're not gonna get to see what he thinks of Renee's mind. But then of course he does meet Renee at the end, so I should have known that was coming. But it was very interesting to see the contrast with how Renee's thoughts work versus Charlie's, and also Renee's scent versus Charlie's, and how they kind of mixed to make Bella. I found that to be an interesting additional, you know, snippet. And when he was like, oh hi Miss Dwyer, was that the name of Renee? Renee's last name is different from Bella's because she's remarried, but I was like, who is that? Who are you? We only stan Cullens, Blacks and Swans around here. So the whole part when Edward was watching the video back, I feel like that was entirely unnecessary. We did not need that. We could have just had a few sentences about how he watched the video back and his emotions while watching the video back. We did not need to be there with him every step of the journey of watching the video. We already know this scene inside out from Bella's perspective, which gives infinitely more detail than Edward could ever give, because Edward was not there. So I felt like that was overkill. It wasn't necessary. And I also found it quite funny that while watching the video, Edward is talking about how he can hear Bella's heartbeat and how he can see the like small bits of blood dripping down, and I was like, okay, vampires have super hearing and they have super sight, but this was set in 2005 and he's watching a video from a cam recorder in 2005. There's no way he can see and hear those things, because as much as he is amazing, like, he's actually picking up what the video picks up. The video probably does not have that good quality. The video probably does not have that good sound quality, so I don't feel like that part was believable. It was too much trying to self-insert him into the situation where he's actually just an observer watching a video piece. And the last thing I'm gonna say, the only thing I really have of interest to say about the prom scene, is that I cracked up so hard because Jacob comes at some point and he needs to talk to Bella and he says, can I cut in? And then in the text it says, Jacob was keeping his voice polite. He didn't want to overstep, and I just cracked up because after this book, Jacob's gonna do a whole load of overstepping lots of boundaries that he should not have overstepped, and I just found that really funny and entertaining. But that is it. I've got no more thoughts on Midnight Sun. Well, I'm gonna give you my conclusion thoughts, so I just lied a little bit there. But as you can tell throughout this whole vlog, I did find it too long-winded. I enjoyed all of the extra scenes, but I feel like some of the scenes that we already had seen and known about, we could have had summarized. I found it so interesting to get to know more about the Cullens and how they work and how they interact and their view and perspective on scenes that I hadn't seen before, as well as some more of the history. I found all of that very interesting, but overall as a book, I just didn't like Edward's perspective. He's an overthinker, I understand that, I accept that, but he's just not the voice for me to read this series in, and I'm infinitely grateful that we get the main series from Bella's perspective. And in terms of rating, I would give this book 3 stars. It has a lot of that nostalgia value for me, but also the nostalgia value didn't eradicate that this book had things that I didn't like about it, which is why it falls at a 3-star rather than a 2-star. I definitely think my nostalgia is kicking in for me to give it a bit of a higher rating. And in terms of the main series, so I'm ignoring books like Life and Death and the short life of Britannia, when it comes to the 4 main novels, I would definitely rank this one as my least favourite. And while I reread all the other 4 occasionally from time to time here and there, I will definitely, well, I'm not going to say definitely, I never want to say never, but I do not foresee me rereading Midnight Sun at all. So that definitely shows that it's definitely lower down. Could it be because I don't have that nostalgia factor anymore? Who really knows? But it was still something I'm glad that I read. Of course I wanted to read it, and it's my last read of 2020, although you'll be seeing this vlog much later because I want to do my favourites videos first. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. Please let me know in the comment section down below, do you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts on Midnight Sun? Did you like it? What did you think of it? Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, even though it was very long. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!